Today we examine a quiet unraveling caught on film. You'll see Lena Markovich pause a family tape, spotting the first cracks in their joyful memories. The object is the estate's projector, playing scenes of picnics and play with hidden tensions around Uncle Milos. What it reveals is the unspoken horror they all helped bury. You will remember this. The dim glow of the old projector flickered across the study walls, casting long shadows over the estate's ornate bookshelves. Lena Markovich sat alone in the leather armchair, her fingers trembling slightly as she queued up another tape. The room smelled of aged wood and faint lavender from her grandmother's forgotten sachet. But the air felt heavy, like the hush before a storm. On the screen, grainy footage bloomed to life. Warm, sun-dappled summers from a decade ago. There was little Lena, no more than 10, chasing her cousins through the garden, laughter bubbling like the fountain behind them. Uncle Milos loomed in the frame, his broad shoulders blocking the light as he hoisted her onto his knee, his voice booming a story that made everyone clap. Nadia, ever the peacemaker even then, braided wildflowers into Lena's hair, her smile soft and sure. The family clustered around the picnic table, plates heaped with burek and slivovitz, toasts raised to unbreakable bonds. Joy radiated from the pixels, unfiltered and alive. But as the tape rolled, fractures seeped in, a pause in the laughter when Father's eyes darted away from Milos's jest. Whispers cut through the audio track, indistinct murmurs from ants huddled by the roses, their glances sharp as thorns. The camera lingered on a frayed edge of the scene where a shadow crossed Milos's face, turning his grin momentarily hollow. Lena's breath caught. These weren't just memories. They were relics of a lie she had helped bury, her silence a willing accomplice. Her chest tightened, anxiety coiling like smoke. How many times had she replayed this, convincing herself the quiet preserved them all? The weight pressed harder now, a vice around her ribs, urging her to swallow the truth again. But her hand moved of its own accord, pausing the tape on that fractured moment. The family photo frozen mid-laugh, edges curling like wounds. She reached for her notebook, pen scratching notes on timestamps, cross-referencing dates with the documents hidden in her drawer. Evidence, not accusations. A draft of the story she could no longer ignore. The projector whirred to a stop, leaving the room in twilight silence. Lena leaned back, her pulse steadying into resolve. The fragments on the screen stared back, demanding more than observation. Could she finally shatter the quiet and step into the light? A few days later, outside the estate's shadowed confines, the therapist's office felt like a confessional booth trapped in amber light. Bookshelves looming like silent witnesses. Lena perched on the edge of the leather armchair, her fingers twisting the frayed edge of her scarf. Dr. Raphael Boyd sat across from her, his posture impeccable, a crystal trinket box on the desk between them, catching the late afternoon sun. Fragile, faceted, holding secrets in its gleam. "I can't keep swallowing it," Lena said, her voice a low tremor. "The silence, it's eating me alive. Uncle Milos, the betrayal. I have to speak. To the family, to everyone. End the code once and for all." Boyd leaned forward, his eyes steady behind wire-rimmed glasses. He tapped the desk lightly, the sound echoing like a warning pulse. "Lena, you've carried this weight for years. Breaking it now, it's not just words. It'll send shockwaves. Through your cousins, Nadia included, the estate, the whispers in the village, and you. How will you stand when the fragments hit?" Her mind raced, a storm of what-ifs. Nadia's pleading eyes, the old home videos flickering with laughter now poisoned. Anxiety coiled in her chest, tight as a vice. Could she really unleash this? The family had clung to silence like a lifeline, patching over the deceit that shattered her parents' legacy. But staying mute? That lie had only deepened the rot. The crystal box glinted again as Boyd adjusted it absent-mindedly, its edges sharp in the light. "Think of it as this," he said softly. "Beautiful from afar, but crack the surface, and everything inside scatters. Irreversible." Lena's breath hitched, the fear gnawing deeper. Yet beneath it, a spark ignited, resolve hardening like steel in her veins. She straightened, meeting his gaze. "I've reviewed the videos, the documents. It's not impulse, it's truth. If I don't, who will? The pain's already there, festering. Speaking it out, that's the only way to heal." Boyd nodded slowly, his objectivity fracturing just a fraction, a flicker of alliance in his expression. "Then prepare. This isn't confession, it's detonation. Are you ready for the blast?" The question hung unspoken in her mind. Can I withstand the explosion when silence cracks? She exhaled, the anxiety ebbing into quiet fire. The session ticked on, the air charged, propelling her toward the inevitable fracture. That evening, back within the estate's familiar walls, the kitchen in the old estate felt like a relic, its stone walls echoing the faint hum of the refrigerator. Lena stood by the counter, fingers tracing the edge of a chipped teacup, her mind a storm of what-ifs. What if Nadia's loyalty to the family code, that sacred silence, pulled her under like quicksand? Lena's heart raced, anxiety coiling tight in her chest, making her breath shallow. She had to know, without pushing, without shattering the fragile air between them. Nadia entered from the hallway, her steps soft on the worn tiles, carrying a stack of linens. She paused, sensing the weight in Lena's gaze. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Nadia said, setting the linens down. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes flicked away, toward the window where rain streaked the glass. Lena swallowed, forcing the words out. "I need to talk. About everything. The betrayal. Uncle Milos." Her mind raced ahead. If she stays silent, does that make her complicit too? Or is speaking the only way to breathe? The anxiety gnawed, but she pressed on, voice steady. "I'm going to expose it. All of it. I can't carry this anymore." Nadia froze, her hand brushing the edge of the counter. She turned toward the far wall, where the old mirror hung, cracked from some long-ago family spat, its silver fissures splintering her reflection into jagged pieces. She stared into it, as if searching for the whole woman she used to be. Expose it? Lena, you know what that means. The family. We'd unravel, like this mirror. Her fingers hovered near the fracture, not touching, but the image lingered in Lena's mind. Broken edges reflecting distorted truths, hiding as much as they revealed. Lena's pulse thrummed, but she didn't push. Instead, she let the silence stretch, her thoughts turning inward. Was this the moment alliances formed or fractured? Nadia's hesitation mirrored her own fears, the pull of blood ties versus the ache of unspoken lies. Anxiety ebbed into something quieter, a reflective ache. "I know the cost," Lena said softly. "But staying quiet, it's killing us. I need you with me. Not against the family, but for what's real." Nadia met her eyes in the mirror's shards, her face a mosaic of doubt and dawning resolve. "I'm scared too. But if you're set on this, I won't stand in your way. Just promise me we'll face it together, whatever comes." Her voice wavered, opening a crack in the wall of pretense. Lena nodded, a tentative trust blooming amid the uncertainty. Yet the question hung unspoken. Would Nadia truly stand by the truth if it meant watching their world shatter like that mirror? The kitchen air thickened with possibility. The rain outside a steady murmur of what might break next. Driven by that fragile alliance, The following afternoon found Lena ascending to the estate's dim attic. Her fingers trembled as she unlatched the dusty archival suitcase. Its leather cracked like old skin, exhaling a puff of stale air thick with the scent of forgotten ink and mildew. Tucked away in the estate's dim attic, under the slanted roof where rain pattered like hesitant confessions, she had come alone. Nadia's guarded promise echoing in her mind. Dr. Boyd's steady voice anchoring her from afar. The suitcase, hauled from the family vault by a reluctant groundskeeper, symbolized the buried weight she now pried open. Relics of loyalties lie. She spread the documents across the scarred oak table. Yellowed ledgers, faded correspondence. A ledger of falsified deeds that unraveled her Uncle Milos's hand in the betrayal. Each page turned like a reluctant witness, revealing discrepancies. Diverted funds, forged signatures that had gutted their inheritance, leaving her parents' dreams in ruins. But as her eyes scanned the lines, memories projected unbidden, overlaying the text like grainy film reels flickering in her mind. There, on a receipt for the estate's expansion, Milos's smug laugh from a summer barbecue, his arm around her father, toasting family first, while pocketing the keys to their downfall. Doubt clawed at her. Was this proof enough? Or just another layer of the silence that had paralyzed her for years? The cost loomed in flashes. Her mother's hollow eyes after the arguments, the way Nadia had pulled her aside that night, whispering, "We endure, Lena." Speaking it aloud, it breaks us. What if unearthing this shattered the fragile threads to Nadia, to the cousins who still called her family? The lie ran deep, roots twisting through blood and nostalgia. How far down did it go? Yet as she pieced together a timeline, cross-referencing letters with bank stamps, her notes piling like accusations, resolve hardened in her chest. This wasn't solitary guilt anymore. It was the evidence Dr. Boyd had urged her to claim, the truth Nadia had tentatively vowed to face beside her. Silence hadn't protected. It had festered, turning warmth into fracture. Her hand steadied on the final document, a hidden affidavit from a long-lost accountant, its words blurring, then sharpening. Betrayal confirmed. Irrefutable. Lena closed the suitcase, dust settling like a veil lifted. The memories lingered, sharp as broken glass. But now they fueled her. Reminders that truth demanded this labor, this confrontation with the past. How deeply was the lie embedded? And did she have the strength to unearth it all? The attic door creaked open to the storm outside, pulling her forward. With the evidence now in hand, that very evening brought the family together in the grand dining hall of the Markovich estate, hummed with forced civility. Crystal glasses clinking like brittle bones under the weight of unspoken accusations. Candlelight flickered across the long oak table, casting shadows that danced over faded family portraits. Relatives, cousins, aunts, distant kin, shifted in their seats, eyes darting between Lena at one end and Milos at the other, his broad frame dominating the head like a throne carved from resentment. Lena's hands trembled as she slid the yellowed documents across the tablecloth, her voice a thin thread pulling taut. "These aren't rumors, Uncle. The ledgers, the transfers, it's all here. You diverted the estate funds, left Father in ruin while you built your silence around us." Anxiety coiled in her chest, a vice squeezing her ribs, making each breath a calculated risk. The room held its collective inhale, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and betrayal. Milos leaned back, his laugh a low rumble that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Lena, child, you're weaving tales from dust. Loyalty isn't a ledger, it's blood. We've buried worse to keep this family whole. Expose this? You'd shatter us for what? Some abstract truth?" His eyes, sharp as flint, swept the table, pulling nods from the elders, whispers from the young. "Silence has protected us. it will again. Her pulse thundered, fear rooting her to the chair, visions of splintered bonds flashing like the home videos she'd pored over, smiling faces now cracked by deceit. But beneath the dread, a spark ignited. Nadia, seated beside her, gripped Lena's knee under the table, a silent anchor. Dr. Boyd, across the way, watched with steady eyes, his nod imperceptible but affirming. They saw it. Not vengeance in her, but a devotion to the ghosts of what was lost. "You call it protection," Lena said, her voice rising, edges sharpening into anger that burned away the hesitation. She shoved the papers forward, one page catching on a fork and fluttering free. "But your loyalty is a cage. It fed the lie that broke us." As she spoke, a faint tinkling sounded from above. The chandelier, that ancient fixture of opulence, loosed a single shard of crystal. It plummeted, glinting in the light, to shatter on the floor beside Milos's chair. No one moved. The fragment lay there, jagged and iridescent, mirroring the fracture lines spreading through the room. Milos's face hardened, denial blooming into defiance. "Choose wisely, Lena. The family or your fury?" The question hung unanswered as murmurs swelled. Would she let silence claim them all, or risk the fall? The confrontation's echoes still lingered into the next morning, when Lena's fingers trembled as she adjusted the tripod in the dim study of the estate. The camera's unblinking lens staring back like an accusation. The room felt colder than usual, its paneled walls echoing the weight of unspoken histories. She had rehearsed this a dozen times in her mind, but now, with the red light flickering to life, doubt clawed at her chest. What if these words don't heal? What if they just carve the fractures deeper? The thought looped, a relentless tide pulling her under anxiety's grip. She hit record, sinking into the worn armchair, the script of evidence clutched in her lap. Yellowed documents from the attic, timestamps of betrayal etched in ink. "This is for the ones who came before us," she began. Voice steady but laced with the raw edge of confession. "I stayed silent to protect you," Lena continued, voice gaining resolve. "But silence let the rot spread. The betrayal didn't just steal money. It stole our memories, turned joy into suspicion." The footage shifted to darker frames. Whispered arguments caught on old tape, the family's facade cracking like the broken glass strewn across the floor after that final dinner. She leaned forward, the camera's lens now a mirror of her own unyielding gaze. "This is the truth we buried. Watch it rise." Her heart pounded, the internal storm raging. Will these words survive the backlash, or will they echo into nothing? But as the last clip faded, a wedding vow from decades ago dissolving into static, Lena straightened. Responsibility settled over her like a cloak. The red light blinked off, but the confession lingered, irrevocable, a spark igniting the impossible return to silence. By midday, the video's weight propelled the family into a tense reunion in the grand dining hall of the estate, hummed with the low murmur of avoidance. Crystal glasses clinking like fragile excuses. Relatives clustered in tight knots, faces etched with the strain of Milos's earlier deflection, his smug insistence that loyalty demanded silence. Nadia stood at the head of the long oak table, her hands trembling but voice steady. A mediator no longer content with half measures. "We've whispered around this long enough," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "Lena has something to say. Not accusations, evidence, memories we've all buried. If we walk away now, we're choosing him over us." Aunt Mira shifted uncomfortably, her fingers twisting the frayed edge of a family photo clutched like a shield. "This will tear us apart, Nadia." "For what? Old grudges?" Whispers rippled. Defenses of the uncle. Pleas for the peace silence had falsely promised. The air thickened with anxiety. Lena's pulse thundering in her ears as she hovered at the room's edge. The weight of their stares pressing like the estate's shadowed walls. Dr. Boyd nodded subtly from the corner. His objective calm now laced with quiet investment. A silent anchor urging her forward. Nadia's gaze locked on Lena, fierce with the alliance forged in the attic's dust. Speak, Lena. We're listening, or we're lost. The room fell into a charged hush, the choice hanging palpable. Truth's sharp edge or loyalty's numb comfort. Lena's breath caught, anxiety coiling in her chest like the cold draft from the chandelier's broken prisms above. But as Nadia's hand brushed hers, resolve ignited. She stepped to the table's end, where the old recorder waited on a tripod, its red light blinking like an unblinking eye, symbol of confessions that could no longer be contained. I've carried this silence for too long, Lena began, her voice quivering at first, then firming as she glanced at the camera's lens. Not to accuse, but to remember. For all of us. The documents, the videos, they show what Milos hid, what we let fester. Faces hardened, some turning away, others leaning in, the family fracturing in real time under the weight of one voice demanding they choose. Nadia flanked her, Boyd's steady presence affirming the shift. Relatives teetered on the brink, whispers dying as Lena's words gathered force. Would they follow this solitary lead into the light of accountability, or cling to the shadows that had bound them? The camera rolled on, capturing the precipice. The momentum carried into the afternoon as the hall in the Markovich estate hummed with stifled breaths, the air thick as old varnish. Rows of relatives, uncles with furrowed brows, aunts clutching rosaries, sat rigid under the chandelier's fractured gleam, its broken glass shards catching the light like accusations. Lena stood at the podium, her hands trembling on the edges of a worn folder, heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. The camera, perched on a tripod beside Nadia, its red light unblinking, captured every quiver. The eye that would etch this moment into permanence. She swallowed, the weight of decades' silence pressing on her chest. Milos, she began, voice cracking like thin ice. And those who followed him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her fingers flipped open the folder, yellow documents spilling across the podium, bank statements, forged signatures, the hidden testimony of a whistleblower long silenced by fear. This is the betrayal that stole our legacy, our trust, not rumors. Proof. Milos shifted in the front row, his smug mask cracking, eyes darting to the exits. Brothers whispered. Aunts leaned forward, torn between flight and fixation. Lena's pulse raced, anxiety clawing up her throat. Would they bolt, shatter the last threads? But she pressed on, no retreat, her words gaining steel. We chose silence to protect us, but it protected him. No more. She thrust a photo forward, the frayed family portrait from the attic, faces smiling in grainy innocence, now overlaid with redacted lines of deceit. Nadia's hand steadied the camera lens. Dr. Boyd nodding from the shadows, their alliance a quiet anchor. Relatives stirred. One uncle rose halfway, then sank back. An aunt's tears traced silent paths. Lena met their eyes, resolve flooding her veins, turning tremor to tower. The truth wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a floodgate burst. As the murmurs swelled into chaos, the question lingered unspoken. Could these pages, this unyielding gaze of the lens, finally drag them from the safe hush that had bound them so long? As the sun dipped low, the immediate aftermath unfolded in the courtyard of the estate lay barren under the slate-gray sky. the air thick with the echo of slammed doors and muffled sobs. Relatives scattered like leaves in a gust. Nadia lingered at the edge, her face etched with resolve, clutching the frayed family photo as if it could stitch the wounds. Others turned away, coats whipping in the chill, their footsteps crunching over the gravel toward waiting cars. Whispers of loyalty and peace trailed them. But Lena stood unmoving at the center, her posture unyielding, the weight of her confession still humming in her veins like a live wire. Milos emerged from the shadow of the manor, his smug facade cracked, eyes darting to the exodus. No more patriarchal shield. The family code he'd wielded like a scepter now crumbled in his grip. He halted paces from her, fists clenched, the lines of his face deepening into something raw, almost pleading. "You've torn it all down, Lena. For what? A ghost of justice?" She met his gaze, voice steady. No tremor now, only the honed edge of conviction forged in the attic's dust and the camera's unblinking eye. "For the truth we buried. You orchestrated it, Uncle. The deceit that poisoned every memory." She stepped forward, gravel shifting under her boots, closing the distance as the last car engine growled to life and faded into the distance. The courtyard emptied further, save for a few steadfast souls. Dr. Boyd nodding from the periphery, Nadia inching closer, her alliance a quiet anchor. Tension coiled in Milos's stance, his breath sharpening as he glanced at the ground. There, amid the stones, glinted shards of broken glass, remnants from the chandelier that had shattered during the forum's chaos, its crystal tears scattering like the illusions they'd all clung to. One piece caught the dim light, sharp and accusing, mirroring the fissures now spiderwebbing their bloodline. He kicked at it absently, the fragment skittering toward her feet, but she didn't flinch. "They'll come back," he muttered, voice rising with desperation. "Family doesn't end like this." Lena's resolve hardened into something taut, the air between them electric with unspoken reckonings. "Or they won't. And we'll build something real from the pieces." The remaining relatives hovered, eyes flicking between them, some nodding, others hesitating, the divide a living scar. Would they forge a new code from this rupture, or slink back to the silence that had birthed the betrayal? The question hung, unanswered, as Milos's shoulders slumped, the patriarch exposed, the courtyard a battlefield of choices yet to settle. As twilight deepened, they retreated inside to the study door, creaked open to the fading light of dusk, casting long shadows across the oak desk where Lena stood, her hands steady on the recorder's cold metal frame. The red light blinked off, its accusatory glow extinguished like the last embers of a fire she'd finally stoked. Relief washed over her first, a deep, shuddering breath that loosened the knot in her chest, the weight of unspoken years lifting just enough to let air in. But it was fleeting, chased by the heavier pull of what came next. Dr. Boyd sat across from her, his notebook open but untouched, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Nadia hovered by the window, clutching the frayed photo album to her chest like a shield, its leather cover cracked from decades of careful hiding. Pages of yellowed snapshots peeked from the edges, frozen smiles from summers long betrayed. "I did this," Lena said, her voice cutting the quiet like a blade sheathed too long. She met Boyd's gaze, then Nadia's, unflinching. "I broke the silence. Not for vengeance, but because the truth was rotting us from inside. The documents, the videos, they weren't weapons. They were the air we couldn't breathe." Her fingers traced the recorder's edge, a tremor betraying the resolve. "But now, I own the fallout. The splits, the stairs in the courtyard. If pain turns to revenge in my hands, that's on me. I promise you, I'll heed this conscience. Guide it right. Boyd leaned forward, his usual objectivity cracking with a rare warmth. You've crossed the threshold, Lena. That act wasn't destruction. It was the fracture that lets light in. True reconciliation starts here. Not in patching illusions, but in building on what's real. He gestured to the album in Nadia's grip. We've all carried these ghosts. Now, we share the load. Sessions, open talks, a structure to rebuild, step by deliberate step. The family's not gone. It's reshaping. Nadia stepped closer, her knuckles white on the album. She flipped it open, revealing a faded image of Lena as a child, arm in arm with Milos under the estate's chandelier, whole before the glass shattered. It hurts to see now, she whispered, passing it to Lena. The pages whispered against her palms, heavy with memory's sharp edges. Hope flickered in Nadia's eyes, tentative, as relatives' footsteps echoed faintly from the hall, some staying, others already gone. Lena closed the album, the snap echoing like a vow. Responsibility settled on her shoulders, not as burden, but anchor. They moved together then, Boyd outlining a calendar of gatherings, Nadia nodding, Lena leading with quiet command. No one spoke of silence. It was banished, a relic in the dust. Yet as the room filled with their shared plans, a shadow lingered. Would this ownership bind them tighter or carve deeper divides?